Welcome to the Right Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Williams, best-selling romance author, book coach, and founder of Serenade Publishing. I've been an avid reader ever since I could hold a book, and I've spent a decade immersed in the world of writing, editing, and publishing fiction. I know firsthand what it takes to turn a love of storytelling into a sustainable, soul-aligned author career. Each week, I share real talk about writing fiction, marketing smarter, and staying inspired, along with up-to-date industry insights and the strategies that are working right now. You'll also hear from fellow authors, editors, and industry experts who are out there doing the work and making waves. Here, we put the woo in the work of writing, publishing, and growing your author business. Think of this as your creative business pep talk, packed with heart, hustle, and a little bit of magic. So get cozy and join me. Your writing journey starts now.
I'm Jen. This is the second time I've done a retreat with Sarah, and she is phenomenal. And what I really love about these is building the community. I actually still talk to people from the one I did last 2 years ago, and it's just great. You learn so much about writing and about yourself. It's kind of like a little therapy session, but definitely recommend, and I'll be at her next one.
Hey Scribe, Sarah here. Welcome back to the Right Podcast. And if you're new, I'm so glad you found your way here. Pull up a chair. This is the show for writers who want more than just craft tips. You want the real talk, the strategy, the honest conversations about what it actually takes to build a life around your writing. Today's episode is a personal one. I want to share something I've built, something I believe in deeply. But more than that, I just want to talk to you, like we're sitting across from each other at a cafe somewhere with good coffee and nowhere to be. So settle in, get comfortable, maybe grab that tea or that wine or whatever your thing is, and let's go. So last week I got home from Queenstown, New Zealand, and I have to tell you, I came home different, a little quieter inside, a lot more certain about why I do what I do. I just finished hosting a writing retreat, 8 writers and 3 special guest presenters, a few days together in one of the most breathtaking places I've ever been, mountains that look like they were designed by someone who takes their job very seriously. That incredible still lake, air that smells clean in a way you forget air can smell. And what happened in that room, around that table, on walks through the town, over wine at sunset, with those mountains just sitting there being magnificent, I'll be carrying it with me for a long time. I always go into retreats thinking I know what the experience is going to look like. I have a plan, a schedule, a vision. And every single time, the retreat becomes something else entirely. Something better than what I planned. Something shaped by the women who show up and what they bring into the room with them. This group was extraordinary. Different ages, different genres, different stages of the writing journey. Some were working on their first novels. Some had already published and were trying to figure out what came next. One woman had been carrying the same story idea in her heart for almost 3 years. 3 years. And hadn't written a single word yet because she was waiting to feel ready. We talked about that a lot, actually. The waiting, the feeling that you need more time, more knowledge, more experience, more permission before you can really begin. And I said to the group, what I'm going to say to you now. The readiness doesn't come before the beginning. It comes because of it. You don't wait until you're confident. You take the step and confidence follows. There was one woman in particular who's been in my thoughts ever since I got home. I won't share her name or details, but I want to tell you her story because I think it might be yours too. She came to the retreat having already written a book, a full novel. She'd put enormous time and heart and energy into it, and she'd self-published it. And then nothing much happened. A few sales, a few lovely reviews from people who knew her, but none of the traction she'd hoped for, none of the momentum. And so she'd started to wonder, and this is the part that broke my heart a little. She'd started to wonder if maybe she just wasn't good enough. If the quiet response to her book was the universe's way of telling her she wasn't cut out for this. She came to the retreat a little defeated, if I'm honest. She was going through the motions of being enthusiastic, but underneath it, there was this low hum of, I'm not sure I belong here. By day 2, something cracked open. We were sitting together, working through her strategy, looking at her book, her brand, her goals, what she wanted the next 5 years to look like. And she said something I've been thinking about ever since. She said, I don't think I ever actually believed it was going to work. I published the book and then I sort of stood back, waiting for something to happen. And when it didn't, I thought, well, that's my answer. And I said, honey, that's not your answer. That's just what happens when you publish without a strategy. That's what happens to almost every author who puts a book out without knowing what comes next. The book not taking off isn't a verdict on your talent. It's just a gap in the knowledge. By the end of the retreat, she had a real plan, a roadmap for how to breathe new life into the book she'd already written, and a clear strategy for the next one. She had a sense of her brand, her audience, her platform. And more than any of that, she had herself back. That belief she'd let go of, she'd picked it up off the floor and decided she was keeping it. That is why I do this. And it got me thinking on that flight home, watching the mountains disappear below the clouds, about all the women who aren't at a retreat, who are at the kitchen table after the kids are in bed, or listening to this in the car during the school run, or sneaking in 20 minutes on their lunch break, carrying their writing dream quietly, wondering if this is really possible for them. It is. I promise you it is. And I want to spend today talking about how. So let me take you back to 2015. My youngest kids, who are twins, had just started daycare. I had 4 kids. Finally, a sliver of time and space. And this feeling that had been quietly building for years. This now or never energy that I couldn't ignore anymore. I'd always wanted to write, since I was 14 actually, when my aunt handed me a romance novel she was donating to charity. She absolutely should not have given it to her 14-year-old niece. It was far spicier than anything I had any business reading at that age. But she did, and I took it home and I didn't surface for an entire weekend. I cancelled plans, I ignored everyone, I was completely gone into the story. And when I finished it, I put it down and thought, I want to do that. I want to make someone feel the way this book just made me feel. So in 2015, I decided to stop waiting and start learning. I enrolled in writing courses, I joined workshops, I read every craft book I could get my hands on, and I started listening to podcasts. The first podcast I ever listened to was Joanna Penn, the Creative Penn podcast. And I want to give her a genuine shout out here because I think she changed the trajectory of my life. She had this extraordinary ability to make you feel the thing you wanted was actually possible. She wasn't gatekeeping. She wasn't making it feel exclusive or mysterious. She was just sharing everything she knew generously and honestly about what it looks like to build a real career as an indie author. And something clicked for me listening to her, because up until that point, my understanding of publishing was very traditional. You write a book, you find an agent, you hope a publisher picks it up, and then you hand everything over and hope for the best. That was the path. That was what real authors did. But Joanna was showing me a different path, one where you keep your rights, one where you keep creative control, where the royalties actually reflect the work you put in, and where you are building something that belongs to you, completely and entirely. Now, I want to be clear, I am not anti-traditional publishing. If one of the big five came knocking tomorrow, I'd absolutely have that conversation. There's a time and a place for everything in this industry. But in 2017, as a debut author in Australia, what I understood about those deals, the royalty percentages, what you give away in terms of rights and copyright, the loss of creative control over things like your covers and your titles, all of it made me think, absolutely not. Not yet, maybe not ever. And part of that thinking comes from my dad. My dad is an entrepreneur, has been his entire life, an inventor of technology, someone who has always backed himself, always trusted his instincts about where opportunity lives. And the thing about growing up with a father like that is that it shapes how you see the world. It shapes how you think about risk and ownership and what it means to build something. I absorbed his mindset before I even knew I was absorbing it. And in case you think the entrepreneurial fire fades with age, this man invented a brand new way of distilling rum at 76 years old. 76. So if you're ever tempted to tell yourself you're too old to start something, I will simply refer you to my father. When I started getting serious about publishing, he and I had some really important conversations. He helped me think through the business side of it, what it meant to own your intellectual property, what it meant to structure things properly from the start so that what you built was genuinely yours. He helped me see my books not just as creative projects, but as assets, things with long-term value, things worth protecting. And so I created Serenade Publishing, not because I was against the traditional path, but because I wanted to keep as much of my profit as possible, protect my copyright and intellectual property, and maintain complete creative control over my work. I wanted to build something where the decisions were mine, where I chose the covers, the titles, my release schedule, my pricing, my formats, where the rights stayed with me. In 2017, that was not the popular decision. I want to be honest about that. Self-publishing still carried a stigma back then. People genuinely looked down their nose at it. Other writers would raise their eyebrows. People in the industry would give you this slightly pitying look, like you'd chosen the consolation prize because the real thing hadn't worked out. But I had listened to enough of Joanna Penn to know that those people were behind the curve. I had watched what was happening internationally. The indie authors who were building extraordinary careers and keeping the lion's share of what they earn. I had my dad's voice in my head reminding me that owning your business, owning your assets, is always worth the extra work. So I held my ground. And you know what's funny? Those same people who looked down their nose at self-publishing in 2017 are now coming to me and asking how I did it. The industry has caught up. The conversation has completely changed. And I am so glad I didn't wait for permission. I published The Brothers of Brigadier Station in 2017 and it hit the bestseller list. And that was just the beginning, because I had built it on the foundation that was mine. The rights were mine, the royalties were mine, the decisions were mine, and from that foundation, everything else grew. That book still earns income today, 8 years later. I've had it translated into German, Portuguese, a bunch of other languages. I produced audiobooks. I created special edition hardcover box sets. One book built on a solid business foundation became multiple income streams across multiple years. That is what's possible when you think like an author CEO from the very beginning. Now, I have 10 published novels. I run Serenade Publishing. I organised the Sunshine Coast Fiction Festival, which last year had over 800 people walk through the doors. I run retreats all over the world. I host this podcast and I mentor writers through a program I've built specifically to help them do what I did, just with a clearer map and less trial and error. So, author CEO, let me unpack that a little because I know it can sound a little bit corporate for something as personal as writing. Author CEO doesn't mean you stop being an artist. It doesn't mean you turn your creative practice into a soulless content factory. It doesn't mean you spend more time on spreadsheets than on sentences. What it means is that you hold two things at once: the creative and the strategic, the heart and the head, the love of storytelling and the understanding that storytelling is also, if you want it to be, a business. And it starts, this is so important, it starts with identity. Most women writers I talk to hover in the doorway of their own dream for years. They use language that shrinks them. I'm sort of working on something. I'm kind of a writer. I've been toying with this idea, toying with it, as if the dream is something they're not quite sure they're allowed to take seriously. I was the same. For years, I would say things like, I write a bit, in a tone that was basically apologizing for having an ambition, as if wanting to be a published author was somehow presumptuous or naive, as if the desire itself needed to be qualified and softened and made smaller so that it wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. And then I stopped doing that. I just decided to stop. I started saying, I'm an author, before I had a single published book, before I had a single sale, before I had an external proof that it was true. And something shifted so quickly it almost scared me. The conversations I was invited into changed. The opportunities that appeared changed. The way I made decisions about my time changed. The way I showed up online, in rooms, in my own head changed. Your identity shapes everything. It shapes how you invest your time, how you talk about your work, what you say yes to, and what you walk away from. So you cannot wait for the world to confirm it before you claim it. You have to claim it first and let everything else follow. Now, alongside the identity shift, an author CEO understands that the book is not the destination, it's the beginning. I think so many women, and I wonder if this is a particularly female tendency, this thing of working so hard toward a goal and then not knowing what to do when you reach it. I think so many of us pour everything into writing the book and then we publish it and then we just wait. We hope, we check our numbers, we try to be patient. And when the world doesn't immediately respond the way we dreamed it would, we conclude that maybe we're just not good enough after all. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that the book came out without a strategy behind it, without an audience that was ready, without a plan for visibility, for community, for the long game. Your book can have such a long, beautiful life if you give it one. But that requires you to think beyond the launch. It requires you to understand your book as an asset that can work for you over time, not a project that either succeeds or fails in its first few weeks and then determines your fate forever. Remember what I said about my dad, about owning your assets, protecting what you've built. That applies to your books just as much as it applies to any other business. Your intellectual property is valuable. Your copyright is valuable. The rights to your stories are valuable. And the decisions you make early on about how you structure your publishing, they matter far more than most writers realize when they're just starting out. That's the author CEO mindset. And once you have it, it changes the way you approach everything. The writing, the publishing, the marketing, the relationships you build in this industry, the way you talk about your work, the investments you make in your own growth. It also, and I can't stress this enough, requires the mindset work because strategy alone doesn't cut it. I have worked with writers who had all the information they needed and still couldn't move forward. Not because they lacked talent or opportunity, but because deep down they didn't believe they were allowed to succeed. They were carrying this quiet, heavy conviction that this kind of life, the author life, the creative career, the income from books, was for other people, not for them. That's the work that goes on underneath the strategy, and it's just as important as the tactics. So, let me tell you what I've created. The Author CEO is a private one-on-one mentorship, and I want to be upfront. This is specifically designed for women writers, women who are writing adult fiction, romance, fantasy, crime, thriller, historical, paranormal, the big, beautiful genres where women absolutely dominate as both writers and readers. Not children's books, not picture books, not nonfiction. Adult fiction. That's where my expertise lies, and that's where I can genuinely help you the most. Here's who this is for. It's for women who have taken some real steps. Maybe you've finished a manuscript, maybe you've published something, maybe you're nearly there, but you feel lost about what to do next. You've got the creative part, you love writing, you might even be really good at it, but the business side feels murky or overwhelming or just completely foreign. You're not sure how to build an audience. You don't know how to create income from what you've made. You're not sure what your brand looks like or how to talk about your work in a way that makes people actually want to read it. And somewhere underneath all of that, there's that fear, the one that whispers, what if I pour everything into this and it never goes anywhere? I know that fear. I've sat with it. I still visit it occasionally, if I'm honest. But I also know what happens when a woman stops listening to the fear and starts building anyway. In the Author CEO mentorship, we work on three things: your creative development, your business strategy, and your mindset. All three woven together because you cannot separate them and expect any of them to work properly alone. We look at your books, your brand, your goals, your income streams, your platform, your visibility, where you are now and where you want to be, and we build a real plan to get there. A plan that's specific to you and your books and your life. Not a generic template, not one-size-fits-all advice, your actual situation with real guidance from someone who has navigated it herself. We do the mindset work alongside all of that, including EFT tapping and abundance mindset practices, because the inner and outer work have to happen together. And we do it with the kind of personalized attention that a course or podcast episode simply can't give you. Because I'm looking at your work. I know your name. I know your books, and I know what you're trying to build. Here's why I think I'm the right person to walk this with you. I'm not a business coach who read some books about publishing. I am an actively publishing fiction author who has built a real business around her books, with all the messy, humbling, occasionally brilliant experiences that come with that. I have had launches that flopped. I have made expensive mistakes. I have had moments of genuine doubt where I wondered if the whole thing was a beautiful delusion. And I've had bestsellers. I've had books earn income for 8 years and counting. I've built a publishing house, a festival, a retreat program, a community. I've done the translations and the audiobooks and the special editions and the in-person events. I've protected my rights, kept my royalties, and made the decisions that have kept my business genuinely mine. I bring all that to the table, not just the highlights reel, the whole journey. So on the flight home from Queenstown last week, I was tired in the best possible way. The kind of tired that comes from really giving something, from pouring yourself into work that matters. And I had this clear, quiet thought sitting above those clouds. This is exactly what I'm meant to be doing. Not just writing my books, though I love that too, but this, helping women find their footing in this industry. Watching the moment someone stops shrinking and starts owning who they are. Watching a woman who came in saying, I'm sort of a writer, leave saying, I'm an author. Like she finally believes it. Like it finally feels like hers. That woman at the retreat, she emailed me when she got home. She said she'd sat down the next morning and written 2,000 words, just like that. Because the block wasn't a writing block, it was a belief block. And once that shifted, the words came. And that's what I want for you. If something in today's episode has landed for you, if you've been nodding along or feeling that little flutter of, this is me, this is what I need, I'd really love to work with you. You can find all the details about the Author CEO mentorship at serenade.com/the-author-CEO. There's an application to start because I want to make sure we're a genuine fit before we commit to working together. And then we'll have a clarity call where we can really dig into where you are and what's possible. If you're earlier in your journey, still in the writing stage, not quite ready to think about the business, Fiction Writing Academy is there for you. It's everything you need to build a strong creative foundation. Same website, serenadepublishing.com. And if you just want a gentle place to start, download the free brainstorming fun sheet. It's on the website too. Simple, free, and genuinely useful for getting unstuck and reconnecting with your ideas. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I know your time is precious. I know there are 100 other things competing for your attention, and you chose to spend some time with me. I don't take that lightly. If this resonated, share it with the women in your life who are carrying writing dreams quietly. The ones who say, I've always wanted to write a book, or I'm sort of working on something. Send it to them. You might just be the reason they finally take the step. And my dad would tell you, it's never too late to start. The man invented a new way of distilling rum at 76. You are never too old to go after your dreams. I'll see you next week. Until then, stop saying sort of, stop saying kind of, stop quietly apologizing for the size of your dream. You're an author, a whole one, no qualifications needed. Own it. Bye for now. Thanks so much for listening to the Write Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world if you'd leave a review and share the show with your writer friends. It helps more creatives find their way to us. And don't forget to follow Serenade Publishing on Instagram and TikTok for more writing tips, publishing advice, and exciting events to keep you inspired. Keep writing, keep dreaming, and know that I'm here to support you every word of the way.